I'm Heather Jo Flores. I'm the author and founder of Food Not Lawns, and I'm also the organizer of something called the Free Permaculture Project. So you can learn more about that at www.freepermaculture.com. And this video is going to be about how to develop an overarching understanding of what permaculture is and does, and how to remember the different aspects of it with a handy tool that I call the 4 Ps of permaculture. So the 4 Ps of permaculture are place, patterns, process, and principles. So it really helps because, we know that permaculture is more than just gardening, and we know that it's a design system for creating sustainable human habitats. But what does that mean? It's really overwhelming when you start looking at the list of principles and you start debating the different ethics and the different interpretations of the third ethic, and you start to look at your landscape and look at your community and try to figure out what exactly you want to do. It's a lot. And so I really think it helps to break it down into these 4 Ps. So the first one is place. So of course, every design is always going to be site specific, and you always want to start where you're at. You start with yourself, and then you look at your kitchen and your bedroom, and you branch out into different aspects of your house, and then you go out into the garden, and then you go out into the community, and then from there you continue to cross boundaries and navigate the margins and expand the potential of what you're doing. So, but it always comes back to place. It always comes back to your home and to where you are now, and what can you do with the resources that you have available. So the next P is patterns. So always, and we're subject to the whims of patterns in nature. Every pattern occurs on every scale, everywhere you go. We're made up of spirals, and the universe is made up of spirals. Every little interaction unfolds as part of a natural pattern. So it behooves us to recognize and respond to those natural patterns, to mimic them in our designs, and to integrate our needs and resources into the patterns in nature rather than working against it. So no matter what you're doing in your permaculture projects, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to patterns in nature and using them to your benefit. So the next P in our 4 Ps of permaculture is process. And I use and teach something called the GOBRADIME design process. So GOBRADIME stands for goals, observation, boundaries, resources, analysis, design, implementation, maintenance, management, monitoring, and evaluate, enjoy, engage. So this really helps. It's a memory tool also. You can say it, you can remember it, GOBRADIME, and you can work your way through the steps. And I also use a very simplified system of the Permaculture Principles. So our 4th P is Permaculture Principles. And what I have done is I've studied all of these different principles from all of these different scholars and designers and writers and teachers, and have synthesized them into 9 little nuggets that I feel fit nicely into the GOBRADIME design process. And that helps me to remember. So here's a little bit more about that and how that works.
Going back again through each step of the GOBRADIME process. Okay, so our goals. Your goals need to always be around increasing and protecting diversity. It's just a pure scientific fact that the more diverse an ecosystem is, the more likely it is to thrive in the face of adversity. And considering the climate cataclysm that is to come, it makes sense for us to have diversity at the core of our goals. From there, your personal goals will vary widely. But the key goal that all of us share in permaculture community, and hopefully as in a human community, is striving for diversity. So, observation step. So now here, the first thing that we learn to observe, and the first thing that all humans are adept at observing, is patterns. And everything that we do and live and experience and are made of really boils down to some fundamental patterns in the universe. So patterns and observation are deeply connected, and when you're out cultivating your observation skills, what you want to really come back to every time is understanding and learning to see and mimic and interact with the patterns around you. So now that brings us to the boundary stage. So we're still here in our first little third of the pie, right? So remember our pie from the last panel. So in the boundary stage, now is when we start getting more specific. Okay, this is where first we've been looking for broad overarching patterns. And, remember, one of Holmgren's principles is designing from patterns to details. So that's where specificity comes in, and being really specific about how much time are you going to spend, how much money are you going to spend, which plants are you going to choose and why, and so on. So the boundary stage is a really important part of the design process, and it really comes back to the details, designing from patterns to details. So if you're familiar with permaculture at all, you're already hearing me talk about some of these principles, right? So now we get to the resources stage. And in the resources stage, we really want to focus on recycling, right? We really want to focus on reusing, reducing, repurposing, and really tapping that waste stream to make sure that we're making use of available resources, that we are aprovechando what is available to us. So that's the resources and the recycling. So a pattern is unfolding here of these permaculture principles that connect. Each of them connects directly to the GOBRADIME process. So this becomes a learning tool for us to memorize these and be able to use them in our day-to-day vernacular as we interact with the land. But also, it's a fun tool to help make sure that we're locking in these ecological design principles in each stage of our design process. So now we're in the analysis stage. And in the analysis stage, you're going to go back through all of this stuff, your goals, your observations, your boundaries, your resources, diversity, patterns, recycling, specificity. And you're going to compare, you're going to group like with like, and you're going to compare your ideas with what's actually possible, and you're going to look at the resources and figure out what you can start to plug in where. And that analysis stage is when the creativity really starts to happen. Okay, and because here we are on the brink, on the edge, and we're about to spill into the super creative stage of our permaculture pie, our GOBRADIME design process. So analysis is all about creativity, about how creative can you get, how adept can you become at using and making best use of all of the resources while adapting to natural patterns, cultivating diversity, and manifesting your vision for what you want to live in your home and in your garden and in your community. So now the design phase is definitely about creativity, but the real key principle we want to think about here is placement. So one of the common principles that you'll hear about in permaculture is relative location. So, group plants according to the water they consume. So if there's an area of the yard that is really, really wet, you're going to put the water needy plants in that area. That's a placement decision. And I've talked about this before, about how permaculture is at its core a placement science. So this is what you're going to be constantly thinking about. The set of principles that are related to placement are deeply connected to the time when you're drawing out your design project and doing your phase planning. What is going to go where? At the end of the day, all farming is just moving stuff around. Really, it's true, and any farmer will tell you so. And then there's all the layers of ethics and principles and love and passion and curiosity that come into that. So here we are now. We're at the implementation phase. And implementation is connected to the principle of inclusion. Many hands make light work. Everything gardens. Integrate rather than segregate. This is the time when you're implementing to really deeply consider this principle and what did you miss? How can you pull things into play? So if you are finding problems during the implementation process and you're having trouble figuring out how to make things work, that's where you need to look, is through that lens of inclusion. So, and then we come to the M, which is the maintenance, monitoring, management phase. And here, the key principle that is ideal for us to employ and for us to consider is autonomy. How can we make systems that run by themselves? How can we, as much as possible, there is no such thing as a no-maintenance garden, but how can you avoid doing the same work again and again? How can you automate systems that comply with nature? How can you allow nature to do the work for you? And this applies on every level, on every scale. So all of these natural patterns that we're learning to mimic and obey occur on every scale of everything that we know. So we might as well play into them, because otherwise we're working against them. So now our final step is the evaluation step. It's not final, it's just the end of the first cycle, right? So the evaluation step is all about feedback, Accept and respond to feedback. Nature will tell you when something isn't working. Your neighbors will tell you when something isn't working. The evaluation phase is all about feedback. So you can see there's each of these steps in the GOBRADIME design process is directly connected to one of the fundamental core principles of permaculture. So we'll talk more about permaculture and the many principles of permaculture, and you can play with those on your own, but this is a really nice, succinct way to think about these things.
So hopefully that helps to clarify things for you and helps to lock in some memory tools that you can use as you continue on your permaculture journey. And I really look forward to seeing you in our free permaculture course found at www.freepermaculture.com. And if you're a woman in permaculture, visit us at permaculturewomen.com. And if you are a writer, a woman writer, please check out my programs for women writers at heatherjoflores.com. Thanks, and see you soon.